Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, June 9th, 2021, and today we're going to be talking about the Virginia governor election that is set to occur on November 2nd, 2021. So last night there was a primary in the state of Virginia in which the Democratic primary voters decisively chose Terry McAuliffe as the Democratic nominee for governor. Glenn Youngkin, the Republican candidate, was chosen through a convention process that wasn't necessarily as routine as the normal nominating process through the means of a primary. Typically speaking, both of these primaries are held on the same day, but the political party opted for a convention election. The Democrats, however, decided to stick with their general terms, and Terry McAuliffe easily won this primary. Now, looking at the numbers, Terry McAuliffe was able to receive 62.2% of the vote. That was 40 points more than that, than his second place opponent, Jennifer Carroll Foy, and then Jennifer McClellan at 12%, Justin Fairfax at 4%, and Lee Carter at 3%. So amongst the five candidates, the majority of the vote, the overwhelming majority at that, voted for Terry McAuliffe. He was easily the Democratic nominee, and it pretty much was expected straight from the beginning. A little background on Terry McAuliffe: he's the former governor who won back in 2013, so he already was a recognizable and easy to select name on that ballot. So Terry McAuliffe, as we all expected, won that nomination process and is moving on to the general election. Now, you might be looking at the total voting number, and I think that it might be interesting. First of all, like I said, not at all a competitive primary. Nowhere near as competitive as 2017. And with the Democratic Party had 488,000 votes in the entire primary process, I want to remind you of what it was like back in 2017. In the 2017 primary, Ralph Northam won narrowly against his opponent, but the total number of votes here was a pretty large amount. Looking at it at face value, it's already over 500,000 votes. You're talking about 530,000 votes across the entire state. This added up to 542,000 to be exact. So 488 versus 542, you're looking at a noticeable difference, but nothing that would automatically assume that the GOP is suddenly in the advantage amongst the primary process. In addition, like I had said before, the primary process in 2021 was much less competitive and drove out less voters, likely as a result. In addition, Donald Trump was at one of his lowest approval ratings of his entire presidency during this time period, during the primaries in 2017 and in the general election. So you can sort of expect, that to have been the situation. Joe Biden simply is a president that's approved of, but I wouldn't exactly expect Democrats to be as enthusiastic against the incumbent president for obvious reasons, or more so for the incumbent president. So moving beyond the primary, we know who the Republican nominee and the Democratic nominee is going to be. This governor election is going to be quite interesting. The primary processes were pretty simple for Democrats, but a little bit different for Republicans. Because Glenn Youngkin was elected through a convention process, the majority of the voters, at least based off polling data, didn't necessarily seem to like Glenn Youngkin. When you look at the way that it actually fizzled out, it went through a ranked choice voting type of system where it went on to the next candidates. Essentially, people were able to list their candidates in the same way that they do in Maine and what they will be doing in Alaska in 2021. So Glenn Youngkin was immediately the favorite. Amanda Chase was actually the one who was technically, going to win the primary had it been a primary. The numbers had all indicated Amanda Chase, which a little bit of a background on her. She is the Virginia version of President Trump. Out of all of these candidates, Amanda Chase certainly embodies President Trump, his campaign rhetoric, his campaign style. Her campaign slogan was "Make Virginia Great Again." That sort of tells you everything you need to know about Amanda Chase. And like President Trump, she was approved of by the Virginia GOP. She was leading in all of the primary polling until the idea of a convention rolled around. And the Trafalgar Group did a poll asking the voters if this was a convention process, who would you support? And Amanda Chase's numbers went down from averaging around mid-20s all the way down to 10%. And, that was the sort of thing here for the GOP. And, this convention process actually was decided early on once it became evident that Amanda Chase might actually be and become easily the nominee simply because of her close rhetoric to President Trump. But because of the convention process, you now see that Glenn Youngkin won through ranked choice voting. A lot of these voters that were backing Kirk Cox or other candidates sort of shifted a lot of their support to Glenn Youngkin or Pete Snyder. And it sort of became a two-way race at that point. Amanda Chase was eliminated by round number 5. And it went down to round number 6. Many of her supporters flocked over to Glenn Youngkin, and then the rest flocked over to Pete Snyder. At the end of the day, Glenn Youngkin won that primary, but it wasn't as competitive as it was back in 2017. But that really doesn't mean much for the overall general election process. We are going to see an election that really determines the scope of the 2022 midterm elections. How far can the GOP make gains in a state that has recently shifted towards the Democratic Party overwhelmingly? And, looking at the 2020 election results in the state of Virginia, I can't find a reason as to why I personally would believe the GOP after that primary process is in the advantage. I don't think that they have 0% of a chance, or 5 or 10 or 20. It probably could be somewhere around 25 to 30 at this point, but they are still fighting an uphill battle. Even though they have maybe a 1 in 4 chance at victory, that's still being in the minority. If all else was equal, chances are the Democrats are going to win in the state of Virginia. And looking at the fact that the Democratic Party pretty much has been trying to win control for quite some time now, I think they will continue a lot of this energy. For Joe Biden to win in the state of Virginia by 10.1%, that's nothing to scoff at. That is not some margin that can be all of a sudden made up in just a year for the Republican Party. Joe Biden's margin of victory was the largest margin of victory for a Democrat in Virginia since 1944. So the Republicans are certainly working within a state that has recently, shifted towards the Democratic Party, the largest victory in over half a century. So they are working within treacherous pathways. It's going to be difficult for the GOP. Difficult is an understatement, but they can still win. It will be an uphill battle, but the GOP, I honestly think, might be up for the challenge. With the nomination of Glenn Youngkin, they knew what they were doing with that nomination. Everyone knew that Terry McAuliffe was going to eventually become this nominee, so it sort of became an understanding that the race was going to come down between those two candidates. Now, Terry McAuliffe reminds me a lot of Joe Biden, and I think that's largely why he was able to win the Democratic primary in this election overwhelmingly. Joe Biden on Super Tuesday, you're talking about an election in which Bernie Sanders had won the first 3 states and, was going into Super Tuesday with not as much momentum as Joe Biden because of those last minute endorsements, but I will say with a lot of energy regardless. But Virginia isn't necessarily a state that's too forgiving or too kind towards progressives. Joe Biden won the state by 30 points more than his second opponent, and that being Bernie Sanders. In 2016, Hillary Clinton also won by 30 points in the 2016 Democratic primary. I wasn't kidding when I said the state typically leans towards centrist candidates. Even in 2017, the Bernie Sanders endorsed candidate was Tom Perriello. Ralph Northam ended up winning this Virginia governor race by winning the Democratic primary. Even though it was close and competitive, the centrist candidate, the more moderate one, ended up coming ahead. So if it happened for Hillary Clinton, if it happened for Ralph Northam, if it happened for Joe Biden, if it happened for Terry McAuliffe, we sort of get a clear trend in this state. And it is evident that centrist candidates seem to perform well in the state of Virginia. I understand the idea of fighting for issues and going at an issue-based platform, which a lot of progressives do try to do. But in Virginia, historically speaking, the Democratic Party tends to do a little bit better when they run more centrist, more moderate candidates. And that's just my initial impression on the race. Terry McAuliffe could win an election by running a progressive platform, but the reality of the situation is he didn't run one to win the primary. He ran on experience, he ran on his electability, and that's what put him in this position. So I do think that Terry McAuliffe also has that residual advantage due to the fact that he was elected governor in a red wave year. 2013 was not kind towards Democrats. It was a year in which we started to realize the GOP was going to do very well in 2014. But the governor's result went to Terry McAuliffe. Looking at 2009, the election year before the Republicans won back control of the United States House of Representatives, the Democratic Party was obliterated. Northern Virginia was red, just to show you exactly how Republican the state was. We saw the incumbent attorney general, but not the incumbent governor because they can't run for re-election. Misspoke originally. But Bob McDonnell, he was able to win in the state of Virginia by over 15 points. You're talking about a margin of victory that was so large that only one of the candidates cracked over 1 million votes. 59% to 41%. You're talking about a difference here of nearly 18 percentage points. How embarrassing for the Democratic Party. It might actually be slightly over 18 percentage points. Because in the election right before, in 2008, Barack Obama had just won the state by 6-7 points. So for such a rapid and significant shift to have occurred, it was quite embarrassing. The Democratic Party was, in a way, possibly expecting this to happen in 2013. But then Terry McAuliffe came around. In 2013, he was able to defeat his Republican opponent, not necessarily by a lot, but he was able to win. And looking at the fact that Terry McAuliffe was this one candidate who was able to win in the governor race, that's where his credibility came from. That's where his Democratic Party platform really resided in. Because had he not been that governor, had he lost in 2013, we would be looking at Democratic nominee likely Jennifer Carroll Foy, or potentially another centrist Democrat that would have taken Terry McAuliffe's place. Not to imply that Jennifer Carroll Foy is a centrist, but I'm saying if Terry McAuliffe was not in the race, potentially a centrist or moderate candidate would have entered in and potentially won that primary. But if not, then we would be seeing Jennifer Carroll Foy winning. But Terry McAuliffe, I would certainly say, played the primary process well, played this I can win in a red wave card well, with a lot of speculation about what type of year 2022 would be. This certainly was, I would say, good for voters on the Democratic side. It was reassuring that they would have a nominee that could end up winning regardless of what type of year it was. In 2017, there's no denying that Ralph Northam rode this wave to victory largely because 2017, around this point in time, Donald Trump was so heavily disliked. That's what carried Democrats to victory. In 2017, before the election occurred, Democrats were in the super minority. Republicans had a super majority in the House of Delegates. And you know what happened? It ended up being a 51-49 Republican majority following this election. After 2019, 2 years later, Democrats officially won back control 55-45 and flipped the Virginia Senate. The Virginia Republican Party had such a strong grip on the state, and then 2017 occurred. And the Democrats ended up doing better. 2018, they win the Senate race by 15 points or higher. They win numerous House elections that they previously didn't. They oust longtime incumbents, such as Barbara Comstock. I've seen her ads for, a very significant portion of my political awareness lifetime. I mean, looking at what the Virginia Democratic Party did, it pushed the Virginia Republicans into irrelevance. And that's what Democrats are going to try to do in 2021. But I'm also not going to say that Glenn Youngkin has no chance at victory, because it would be naive to say that. Yes, it looks as if that Terry McAuliffe is an electable candidate and that he has the advantage. But I'm not going to discount the Republicans the way I would have if this was another Trump second term or if we were back in 2017. I think Glenn Youngkin certainly could do better than Ed Gillespie and has a shot at winning the governor's election. But I do want to keep my eyes out on the polling data. The Virginia polling data in 2020 predicted that Biden would win the state by 12 points. He won by 10, so it was off by 2 points. But in 2017, it predicted that Northam would win by just 3 points. He won by 9 points, a difference of 6 points. Looking at the margins, the changes between the polling results and the actual results, there's a wide range. Some benefiting Democrats, some benefiting Republicans. At the end of the day, it really comes down to the type of race. Off years where Trump isn't on the ballot, typically those polls are more accurate. But as 2017 shows us, not necessarily. Sometimes Democrats do better. There isn't one conclusive way to determine if Democrats or Republicans are going to do better, but I do want to take every election at its own value. And we'll figure out if those data points are actually correct. And they did point us in the right direction. They did accurately predict the winner, just some of them were wrong about the margin. Quinnipiac was spot on with that 9-point margin, and other pollsters were spot on with Joe Biden's 10-point victory. But the averages are what skews it down to a 3-point victory, what brought it up to a 12-point victory for Biden. But all in all, I will say that the polling data still might direct us in the right direction, and I am excited to see what type of data is released between Glenn Youngkin and Terry McAuliffe. But our governor's election is officially underway, officially in a position where it could help the Democrats or improve the Republican Party's already large, not necessarily large, but majority amongst the National Governors Association. If you're looking at the numbers, Republicans currently have 27 seats, the Democrats only have 22. If they added up to 28, well, that would be pretty good, because it could mean that Republicans might still be able to have the chairman from their party if they have the majority. So let's say, for instance, that 2022 rolls around and Democrats are able to flip back Maryland and maybe New Hampshire because Chris Sununu wants to run for Senate, but then the Republicans still in the majority. But had there been a position where Virginia remained blue, it would be more difficult to argue that case. But in this instance, we're assuming that Virginia is going red for the Democratic Party. But if we were to take it away, red for the Republican Party. But if we were to take it away, the Democrats probably still would have the advantage. But Virginia certainly could be helping Republicans and also helping Democrats right now I would say the Democratic Party certainly needs more than the GOP, but it would offer a nice buffer for the GOP for the 2022 midterm elections. So we still have a long time until the election. We have a couple of months, a few months actually, where we're going to see a lot of campaigning. If you're in the DC metro area, expect a lot of campaign ads. I think we're going to see some type of excitement and some type of focus on Virginia that we haven't seen from the Republican Party in quite some time now. They may view this state as unattainable, but I can certainly tell you now, the Virginia Republican Party and the National Republican Party is still going to want to have some type of improvement or increased electoral performance to sort of build that narrative and build that momentum that 2022 will be a red wave year. Because if this race flops, if this race is in a position where Democrats improve off their 2017 numbers, it will never look good for the GOP. There's no way they could spin that. There's no way they could be in a position where they could say that's beneficial for our party. It'll just inspire us to fight harder. No, that's nothing. Obviously that's not true. You're just trying to cover your losses. So we'll see what happens in Virginia. I'm quite excited to see if the polling data is accurate. This race is going to be set to be occurred on November 2nd, 2021. So we have a little bit of a ways to go, but it's going to come up right around the corner because that's how American elections work. You think it's a far away time period, a far away election, and it ends up being right around the corner. But I will say that if you want to get involved directly in this governor's race, if you're able to phone bank, canvass, etc., do so. Of course, civically engage, and this would be a perfect opportunity for your first true experience before the 2022 midterm elections, regardless of what side you're on. It's going to be a very crucial one. It's going to be one that's going to be hard fought on both sides. I think that it's important to have your voice heard, especially if you're a Virginia resident, and register to vote. If you're in the state and you know that you'll be able to vote in this election, November 2nd, 2021, research those deadlines and get out to vote. Because I can tell you, it's going to be a race that, it's not just you're getting off of school. Actually make your voice heard. Even if you can't vote, try to do anything you can for either side that you support, because that's the most American thing to do. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2021 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.